The CEO's little daughter finally spoke her very first word. She pointed straight at the waitress and called her Mommy in front of everyone. Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and subscribe. This story has a surprise finale you need to see. The morning shift at Rosie's Diner started at 5:15 a.m., but Heather always arrived at 4:47, 18 minutes before anyone else. She liked the quiet, the way the fluorescent lights hummed over empty booths, the smell of coffee not yet brewed, the silence before the chaos of breakfast rush descended like a wave she'd learned to ride but never truly mastered. 26 years old, $1,147 in her savings account, $31,200 in student loans for a nursing degree she'd abandoned 3 semesters before finishing, and a studio apartment in Queens that cost her $1,175 a month for 422 square feet of space that she'd somehow turned into a home. She tied her apron with practiced hands, the same motion she'd made 6 mornings a week for the past 19 months, and began her opening routine. Salt shakers first, then pepper, then the sugar caddies, making sure each one had exactly 12 packets of white, 8 of brown, and 6 of that artificial stuff that tasted like chemicals, but that Mr. Henderson at table 4 requested every single day without fail. To understand who Heather really was, you had to go back 9 years, to a cramped apartment in Newark, where a 17-year-old girl sat beside her father's hospital bed, holding a hand that had grown too weak to squeeze back. Thomas Murphy had been a construction worker for 23 years. He'd built houses, office buildings, the new wing of St. Mary's Hospital, where he would eventually take his last breath. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it, because Thomas Murphy was the kind of man who didn't complain about stomach pain, who worked through exhaustion, who put his daughter's college fund ahead of doctor's appointments. He died on a Tuesday in March. Heather remembered because it had been raining, a cold, relentless rain that seemed to match the hole opening up inside her chest. She was 17, her mother had left when she was 6, and suddenly she was alone in a way that most people never truly understand. "You're gonna be something, sweetheart," her father had said in those final hours, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me, don't let this world make you hard. Stay soft, stay kind. That's the real strength." She'd promised. And for 9 years, through every struggle, every setback, every moment when giving up seemed easier than going on, she'd kept that promise. The nursing program had been her dream, a way to help people the way the nurses had helped her father in those final weeks. But dreams cost money, and money was something Heather never seemed to have enough of. When her financial aid fell through after her 3rd semester, when the choice became finish school or keep a roof over her head, she'd made the practical decision, the heartbreaking one. Now she poured coffee for strangers and tried not to think about what might have been. "Morning, honey." Dolores, the other morning waitress, shuffled through the back door at exactly 5:14 a.m., 1 minute before she was required. 63 years old, 41 of them spent in this diner, and she moved like someone who'd long ago made peace with the fact that this was her life. "You're here early again. Couldn't sleep." Dolores gave her a knowing look. "The dream again?" Heather shrugged, not wanting to talk about it. The dream was always the same, her father's hospital room, the beeping of machines, the moment when the line went flat. 9 years, and she still woke up some nights with tears on her cheeks and an ache in her chest that no amount of time seemed to heal. "Table 7's yours today," Dolores said, moving toward the kitchen. "The regulars love you there. Better tips." Table 7, the big corner booth by the window. Heather nodded and grabbed a fresh pot of coffee as the first customers of the day began trickling through the door. By 8:47 a.m., the breakfast rush was in full swing. Heather had served 31 customers, refilled coffee cups approximately 87 times, and earned $47, $25 in tips, a decent morning, but not great. Her feet ached in the sensible black shoes she'd bought at Payless for $24.99, and there was a small grease stain on her apron that she hoped no one would notice. That was when he walked in. She didn't notice him at first, just another customer in a city full of them. But then she saw the child, and everything else faded into background noise. The little girl couldn't have been more than 2 years old. She had dark curly hair that bounced with each step, enormous brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and she was clutching a stuffed elephant that had clearly seen better days. The man carrying her was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair touched with the faintest hint of grey at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone, and eyes the colour of storm clouds. He wore jeans and a simple grey sweater that probably cost more than Heather's monthly rent. But the most striking thing about him wasn't his obvious wealth or his movie star good looks. It was the way he held his daughter, protective, tender, like she was the most precious thing in his world, like she was his entire world. "Anywhere?" he asked, his voice deeper than she expected. "Wherever you'd like," Heather said, grabbing a menu. "But the corner booth has the best view if you're interested, and we have high chairs." He hesitated for just a moment, something flickering across his face, surprise maybe at her warmth. Then he nodded. "The corner booth sounds perfect." Heather led them to table 7 and watched as he settled his daughter into the high chair with practiced ease. The little girl immediately began banging her stuffed elephant against the table, making sounds that weren't quite words, but were clearly meant to communicate something important. "Baba Baba," she announced, looking at Heather with those enormous eyes. "Is that so?" Heather found herself smiling, a real smile, not the professional one she wore like armor. "That's very interesting. Tell me more." The little girl grinned, revealing 4 tiny teeth, and banged her elephant harder. "Sorry," the man said, reaching for the menu. "She's vocal. Don't apologize. She's adorable." Heather pulled out her notepad. "Coffee, please, black. And for the little one, we have apple juice, milk, orange juice. Milk, please, in a sippy cup if you have one." "We do." Heather made a note. "I'll give you a few minutes with the menu." She walked away, but something made her glance back over her shoulder. The man was staring at his daughter with an expression she recognized, love and grief so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. She'd seen that look in the mirror for months after her father died. When she returned with the coffee and milk, the man had composed himself. Whatever she'd seen was buried beneath a mask of casual indifference. "Ready to order? Pancakes for me, and..." He studied the menu, then the child. "Do you have anything soft?" She's still working on the whole chewing thing. "Our oatmeal is really good. I can ask the kitchen to make it a little sweeter. Add some mashed banana. The kids usually love it." Something shifted in his expression. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise at her thoughtfulness. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." "Of course." She scribbled the order. "I'm Heather, by the way. Just flag me down if you need anything." "Heather," he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "I'm Daniel, and this is Lily." "Hi, Lily." Heather waved at the little girl, who waved back with her elephant. "That's a beautiful name." It was her mother's favorite flower. The past tense hit Heather like a physical blow. Was her mother's. She understood suddenly the grief she'd seen in his eyes. "I'll get this order in right away," she said softly, and walked toward the kitchen with a heaviness in her chest that had nothing to do with her own sorrows. The morning continued. Customers came and went. Heather refilled coffee cups, took orders, delivered plates of eggs and bacon and toast. But she found herself checking on table 7 more than strictly necessary, making sure Daniel's coffee was always fresh, that Lily had enough napkins for the oatmeal she was enthusiastically spreading across her face. It was during one of these check-ins, 11:23 a.m., she'd remember later, that it happened. Lily had been babbling steadily for the past hour, a constant stream of sounds that were almost words but not quite. Daniel seemed used to it, responding to her nonsense syllables as if she were delivering important news, and Heather found herself charmed by their interaction. She was refilling Daniel's coffee, his fifth cup, when Lily suddenly went quiet. The little girl was staring at Heather with an intensity that seemed impossible for a 2-year-old. Her small hand lifted, finger pointing directly at Heather's face, and then clear as a bell, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Mama." The coffee pot in Heather's hand tilted. Hot liquid splashed across the table, across her hand, but she barely noticed the burn. Her eyes were locked on Lily's, on that tiny finger still pointing, on the word that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the diner. "Mama," Lily said again, firmer this time, as if confirming her own declaration. "Mama, Mama, Mama." Every customer in the restaurant had turned to look. Dolores stood frozen by the register, her mouth hanging open. A man at table 3 had stopped mid-bite, his fork suspended in the air. Daniel's face had gone pale. "Lily," he said, his voice strained. "No, sweetie, that's not—" "Mama!" Lily shouted, reaching her arms toward Heather. "Mama! Mama!" Heather's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This couldn't be happening. This was impossible. She'd been waiting tables for 19 months, had served thousands of customers, had smiled at countless children. No one had ever— "I'm so sorry," Daniel was saying, fumbling for his wallet, his composure completely shattered. "I don't know why she's never her first word, and he was spiraling. Heather could see it happening, could see the panic rising in his eyes, the way his hands were shaking as he pulled out a $100 bill and threw it on the table. "I need to go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Wait." The word left her mouth before she could stop it. "Wait, please." He paused, Lily already in his arms, the little girl still reaching toward Heather with desperate hands, still crying "Mama" over and over like it was the only word she knew. Heather stepped closer. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's okay. She's not wrong, you know." Daniel stared at her. "What? I mean—" Heather felt her cheeks flush. "Not that I'm her, obviously I'm not, but she's 2. She sees a woman being nice to her, and her little brain made a connection. It's actually really normal, really healthy." She didn't know if any of that was true. She was making it up, saying whatever came to mind to ease the anguish on this stranger's face. "She's never spoken before," Daniel said, his voice breaking. 26 months old, and she's never said a single word. The specialists said she might be delayed, that she might need therapy, that she might— He stopped, swallowed hard. Her first word, and it was "Mama." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them fully understood. "That's not something to be sorry about," Heather said. "That's something to be grateful for." She spoke. That's what matters. Lily had stopped crying. She was watching Heather with those enormous eyes, her elephant clutched to her chest, her small body still straining toward this stranger who had somehow become the most important person in her world. "Can I?" Heather asked, gesturing toward the child. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Heather reached out and took Lily's tiny hand. The little girl's fingers wrapped around hers immediately, holding on tight. "Hey there, sweet girl," Heather murmured. "You did so good today. Your first word. That's so big. Your daddy must be so proud." Lily smiled, a beautiful, innocent smile that knew nothing of grief or loss or the complicated emotions swirling around her. "Mama," she said again, softer this time, like a secret meant just for Heather. And Heather, who had spent 9 years learning to live without a parent, who had built walls around her heart to keep the pain at bay, who had told herself that she didn't need anyone, felt something crack open inside her chest. "The 100 is too much," she said, finally finding her voice. "Your bill was 23.47. Daniel shook his head. Keep it. Please, you've already given us more than you know. He turned to leave, then stopped, looked back at her. Will you be here tomorrow? The question surprised her. I work mornings, 6 days a week. Then we'll be back. He said it like a promise, like a vow. If that's okay. Heather looked at Lily, at those tiny fingers still wrapped around her own. Yeah, she said. That's okay. She didn't know it then, couldn't possibly have known, but that moment, that single word from a 2-year-old who'd never spoken before, had just changed the entire trajectory of her life. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now let's see what happens next. They came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. By the end of the first week, Heather had learned that Daniel took his coffee black with no sugar, that Lily loved the oatmeal with banana but hated it with blueberries, and that father and daughter had a morning routine that revolved around this corner booth at Rosie's diner. What she hadn't learned, what Daniel seemed determined to keep hidden, was anything about their life outside these walls. He deflected personal questions with the skill of someone who'd had plenty of practice. When she asked what he did for work, he said investments in a tone that discouraged follow-up. When she asked where they lived, he said uptown, without specifying where. When she asked about Lily's mother, just once, carefully, gently, his entire body had gone rigid, and Heather had immediately changed the subject. But Lily. Lily was an open book. The little girl had latched onto Heather with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every morning when they arrived, her eyes would scan the diner until she found her, and then she would reach out those small arms and say the word that had started everything. Mama. Heather had stopped flinching at it, had even started to find a strange comfort in it, this tiny person who had chosen her for reasons she couldn't understand, as someone important. You're good with her, Daniel said on day 8, watching as Heather made faces at Lily while his daughter shrieked with laughter. Really good. I like kids. Heather shrugged. Always wanted to be a pediatric nurse, actually, once upon a time. What happened? The question caught her off guard. He so rarely asked anything personal that she'd stopped expecting it. Life happened, she said. Money happened. Or the lack of it anyway. Daniel's expression shifted, something like recognition in his eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. The lie came easily. She'd told it so many times it almost felt true. Things work out the way they're supposed to. Do you believe that? Another question. He was full of them today. I'm trying to, she admitted. My dad used to say that everything happens for a reason, that we just can't always see the reason while we're living it. Your dad sounds like a wise man. He was. He died when I was 17. The words hung in the air between them. Heather hadn't meant to say them, had trained herself years ago to avoid this topic with strangers, but something about Daniel made her walls feel lower than usual. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time the words carried weight. Understanding. What about you? She asked before she could stop herself. Your parents, are they? My father passed away 3 years ago, heart attack. Daniel's jaw tightened. My mother is alive, but we're not close. She has opinions about how I'm raising Lily that I don't particularly want to hear. Like what? Like I should hire a full-time nanny instead of doing everything myself. Like Lily should be in the most exclusive preschool in Manhattan instead of coming to diners with her father. Like... He stopped himself, shook his head. Sorry, you don't need to hear this. I don't mind, and she didn't. There was something raw beneath his polished surface, something real, and she found herself wanting to see more of it. Lily chose that moment to throw her elephant on the floor. Oh, she said, another new word she'd learned. Oh, Mama. Heather bent to pick it up, and when she straightened, Daniel was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Why does she call you that?" he asked quietly. "It's been over a week, and she's still—" "I don't know." Heather handed the elephant back to Lily. Maybe she just needed someone to fill the role, even if it's not real. "It's not real," Daniel said, so softly she almost didn't hear him. "Not to her." They stared at each other for a long moment. Something passed between them, understanding, connection, the beginning of something neither of them was prepared to name. The bell over the diner door chimed, breaking the spell. "I should check on my other tables," Heather said, even though her other tables were fine, even though she wanted nothing more than to stay right here, in this moment, with this man and his daughter, who had somehow become the best part of her mornings. "Heather," Daniel's voice stopped her. "Would you, I know this is probably inappropriate, and you can absolutely say no, but would you want to get coffee sometime? With me? Without the—" he gestured at the diner, "professional obligation?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You're asking me on a date. I'm asking if you want to get coffee. What happens after that?" He almost smiled. "I guess we'd figure that out." She should say no. He was a customer. He was clearly wealthy in a way that she would never be. He had a daughter who had already gotten too attached, and this could only end in disaster. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." His smile, his real smile, the first one she'd seen, transformed his entire face, made him look younger, softer, like the man he might have been before grief carved its marks into his features. "Saturday?" he asked. "I know you work mornings, but—" "I have Saturday afternoon off. Then Saturday afternoon it is." He left soon after, Lily waving goodbye over his shoulder, and Heather spent the rest of her shift in a daze, barely noticing the customers, barely hearing Dolores's questions about that handsome man and his adorable baby. She was going on a date, her first date in over 2 years, with a man whose last name she didn't even know. What had she gotten herself into? Saturday arrived both too slowly and too quickly. Heather changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple blue sundress she'd bought at a thrift store for $12 3 years ago. It was the nicest thing she owned, and standing in front of her cracked bathroom mirror, she tried to convince herself that she looked okay. Presentable. That was the word. She looked presentable. They'd agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on the Upper East Side, neutral territory he'd called it, somewhere between his world and hers. She'd Googled the address after he'd texted it, had nearly choked when she saw the prices. $8 for a regular coffee, $14 for a latte. She'd have to nurse one drink the entire time and pray he didn't suggest food. He was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with a clear view of the door. No Lily today. He'd mentioned something about a babysitter, and seeing him without his daughter felt strange, like meeting a different version of the same person. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi." That smile again, the real one. "You look beautiful." "I look like a waitress on her day off." "You look beautiful," he repeated more firmly. "Can I get you something? The lavender latte here is incredible. Just a regular coffee is fine." He must have seen something in her expression because he didn't push, just signaled the waiter and ordered 2 regular coffees, black. "So," he said once they were alone again, "I realize I've told you almost nothing about myself. That seems unfair, given how much time we've spent together. I figured you had your reasons." "I did. I do." He took a breath. "My name is Daniel Ashford. My company, Ashford Industries, develops real estate. Commercial mostly, though we've been moving into residential in the past few years. We have about 4,000 employees across 6 countries, and our current valuation is somewhere around $3 billion. Heather's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry, did you say billion? With a B? With a B?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I wanted to tell you sooner, I just—" When you meet someone new and they find out about the money, everything changes. They start treating you differently, looking at you differently. I wanted you to know me, just me, before you knew that. She set her cup down slowly, processing. The expensive sweaters, the way he never seemed to worry about the bill. The deliberate vagueness about his work, it all made sense now. Why are you telling me this today? Because if this goes anywhere, He stopped, started again. I've been lying by omission, and I don't want to do that anymore, not with you. Heather studied him across the table, the nervous set of his shoulders, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. He was scared, she realized, terrified that she would react the way everyone else probably did. I don't care about your money, she said. Everyone says that. I mean it. She leaned forward, holding his gaze. I've been poor my whole life. I know what money can and can't buy. It can't buy my dad back. It can't buy the years I lost taking care of him. It can't buy genuine connection or real love or any of the things that actually matter. She paused. What do you think I'm going to do? Start treating you better because you're rich? I already treat you well because you're a good father and a kind person, and your daughter's laugh is the best part of my morning. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her complete surprise, his eyes grew wet. I'm sorry, he said, wiping at them with the back of his hand. I haven't talked to anyone like this in years. Since your wife? He nodded, not trusting his voice. What happened? Heather asked gently. If you want to tell me, you don't have to. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak. Her name was Emma. We met in college. She was studying art history. I was studying business. And we had nothing in common except this immediate, undeniable connection. We got married 6 years ago, started trying for a baby almost immediately. He paused, his hands wrapped tightly around his coffee cup. It took us 3 years. Fertility treatments, hormone shots, the whole exhausting process. When she finally got pregnant with Lily, we thought it was a miracle. Heather waited, sensing there was more. The pregnancy was difficult. Emma had preeclampsia. Do you know what that is? High blood pressure. It can be dangerous for the mother and baby. She was on bed rest for the last 2 months. We had specialists, the best doctors money could buy, a whole team monitoring her around the clock. They assured us everything would be fine, that modern medicine had advanced to the point where complications were rare, manageable. His voice cracked. They were wrong. Daniel, she hemorrhaged during delivery. They'd planned for it, had blood ready, had surgeons standing by, but there was too much, too fast. He looked up at Heather, and she saw in his eyes a grief so profound it took her breath away. She held Lily for 12 minutes. 12 minutes before her blood pressure dropped too low, and they had to take the baby away, and He couldn't finish. Heather reached across the table and took his hand. He gripped it like a lifeline. She died 2 hours after Lily was born, he said quietly. And I've spent every day since then trying to be both parents to a child who will never know her mother, trying to give Lily everything Emma would have given her, trying to keep going when some mornings I can barely get out of bed. Daniel, Heather's voice was thick with tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. It's been 26 months, he said. 26 months, and some days it feels like it happened yesterday. Other days I can barely remember what her voice sounded like, and that terrifies me even more. He looked at their joined hands. And then I walked into your diner, and my daughter, who hadn't spoken a single word in her entire life, looked at you and said, Mama. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or run away and never come back. Why didn't you? Run away? Because of the way you handled it. He finally met her eyes. Anyone else would have been awkward, uncomfortable. They would have made it weird. But you just accepted it. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. like you understood. I do understand, Heather said softly. Loss, grief. The way it never really goes away, just changes shape over time. I've been carrying my father's death for 9 years. Some days it's a weight I can barely lift. Other days I can almost forget it's there. But it's always there, and it always will be. Daniel lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Heather felt something crack open inside her chest. I wasn't looking for this, he said. I wasn't looking for anyone. I'd convinced myself that I'd had my great love, and that was it. One per lifetime, right? That's what they say. What changed your mind? A 2-year-old with a stuffed elephant and really good taste in mother figures. Heather laughed despite herself, a wet, emotional laugh that matched the tears still sliding down her cheeks. I'm not trying to replace Emma, she said. I would never. I know. He squeezed her hand. That's not what this is. Emma will always be Lily's mother. Nothing will ever change that. But maybe. He hesitated. Maybe there's room for more than one person to love her. Maybe grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. They sat there, in that overpriced coffee shop, holding hands across the table like two survivors of separate shipwrecks who had somehow found each other in the middle of an endless ocean. Neither of them knew what came next. Neither of them could predict the challenges ahead, the complications, the misunderstandings, the moments when the weight of their combined grief would feel like too much to bear. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And sometimes that's enough to start. The weeks that followed felt like a dream Heather was afraid to wake from. Daniel and Lily became a permanent fixture in her mornings, table 7, 8:30 a.m. every single day. But now there were also afternoon coffees, evening phone calls that lasted until 2 a.m. and stolen moments in the diner's back hallway where Daniel would pull her close and whisper things that made her heart race. By week 3, she'd visited his apartment for the first time. Calling it an apartment felt like calling the ocean a puddle. It was a $15 million penthouse on the Upper West Side, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park and more square footage than Heather had occupied in her entire life combined. She'd stood in the doorway, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the wealth surrounding her, until Lily had toddled over and grabbed her hand. "Mama, look!" The little girl pulled her toward a corner of the living room that had been transformed into a play area. "Look! Look!" The contrast was almost comical. Designer furniture worth thousands of dollars, and in the middle of it all, a plastic play kitchen and a pile of stuffed animals that Lily had apparently been introducing to each other. "She wanted to show you her kingdom," Daniel said, coming up behind her. His hand found the small of her back, warm and steady. "She's been talking about it all morning." "She's been talking," Heather repeated, still marveling at the change. In the 5 weeks since that first mama, Lily had exploded into language. New words every day: dada, more, up, no, her personal favorite, elephant, which came out as elfin, and of course mama, always mama. The speech therapist says she's making remarkable progress. Daniel's voice held a wonder that never seemed to fade. She thinks Lily was ready to talk the whole time. She just needed a reason. Heather felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not—" "Don't." He turned her to face him, cupping her cheeks in his hands. "Don't say you're not special. Don't downplay what you've done for her, for us." His thumbs traced gentle circles against her skin. "You walked into our lives with a coffee pot and a smile, and you woke my daughter up. You woke me up." She kissed him then, their 4th kiss. Not that she was counting, she was definitely counting, and it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before. "Mama, dada, kissing!" Lily's delighted shriek broke them apart. "More kissing!" They both laughed, and Daniel scooped his daughter up, situating her between them in a group hug that made Heather's chest ache with something she was afraid to name. This is what family feels like, she thought. This is what I've been missing. But even as the thought crossed her mind, a darker one followed. This is what I could lose. She'd lost too many people. Her mother, who'd walked out when she was 6, a woman she remembered only in fragments, a perfume she still couldn't smell without crying. Her father, who'd been everything until cancer took him away. Even her dream of nursing sacrificed on the altar of financial necessity. Heather had learned, through painful experience, that good things didn't last, that happiness was borrowed, never owned, that the higher you climbed, the further you had to fall. And she was climbing so high with Daniel. Too high, dangerously high. Hey, his voice pulled her back. Where'd you go just now? Nowhere. She forced a smile. I'm right here. But she could tell he didn't believe her. Daniel had developed an uncanny ability to read her moods, to sense when she was retreating behind walls she'd spent years building. Come on, he said, not pushing. Let me show you the rest of the place, and then maybe we can order dinner. There's this Thai place that delivers, and their pad Thai is... Pad Thai! Lily shouted, having apparently absorbed the word from somewhere. Pad Thai! Pad Thai! You don't even know what that is, Daniel laughed. Pad Thai! The evening was perfect. Too perfect. They ordered food and ate on the living room floor because Lily refused to sit at the table. They watched a children's movie that Heather had somehow never seen, and she cried at the ending while Daniel pretended not to notice. They gave Lily her bath together, a chaos of splashing and soap bubbles and a rubber duck named Mr. Quackers, and then Daniel read her a bedtime story while Heather stood in the doorway watching. Emma's presence was everywhere in this apartment, in the abstract paintings on the walls, which Daniel had mentioned were her favorites, in the books on the shelves, art history, classic literature, poetry collections that looked well worn and loved, in the nursery, designed with such care and attention that it was clear every detail had been planned by someone who never got to use it. A framed photo sat on Lily's nightstand. Emma, very pregnant, laughing at something off camera. She was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, a smile that seemed to light up the room even in photograph form. That's Mama Emma, Daniel said softly, noticing where Heather's gaze had landed. I show Lily every night, tell her stories about her mother. I don't want her to grow up not knowing who Emma was. That's... Heather swallowed hard. That's really beautiful, Daniel. It was hard at first, talking about her without breaking down. But Lily deserves to know. He looked at the photo, then at Heather, something complicated in his expression. Emma would have liked you. She had this way of seeing the best in people. She would have seen what I see in you. Heather didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. Later, after Lily was asleep and they were curled up on the couch together, Daniel broached a subject she'd been dreading. I want you to meet my mother. Heather's body went rigid. Your mother? The one who thinks you should have a nanny and put Lily in an exclusive preschool? The same, he sighed. Look, I know she can be. Difficult. But she's Lily's grandmother, and she's my mother, and if we're going to be serious, if this is going somewhere... Is it going somewhere? The question surprised them both. Heather hadn't meant to ask it, but now that it was out there, she realized how desperately she needed the answer. Daniel turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I want it to. I want you in my life, Heather, in Lily's life, not just as the waitress who serves us breakfast, but as... He paused, searching for the right word. As a partner, as someone who wakes up in this apartment and complains about my snoring and argues with me about what movie to watch. You snore? Apparently quite loudly. Emma used to... He stopped. Sorry, I shouldn't... No. Heather took his hand. Don't apologize. She was your wife. She's Lily's mother. She'll always be part of your life, and that means she'll be part of mine too. If... She hesitated. If you want me in your life. I want you in my life, he said firmly. So will you? Meet my mother. Let me introduce you as my girlfriend. Girlfriend. The word sent a thrill through her, immediately followed by a wave of anxiety. Daniel's mother was Margaret Ashford, a name that even Heather recognized from charity galas and society pages. A woman who moved in circles where people's shoes cost more than Heather's yearly salary. "She's going to hate me," Heather said. "She might," Daniel admitted. "She hated Emma too at first, said she wasn't from the right kind of family, didn't have the right connections. It took years for her to come around." He lifted Heather's hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "But I don't care what my mother thinks. I care what I think. And what Lily thinks, and we're both pretty crazy about you." "Crazy?" Heather echoed. "That's one word for it. Please, just give it a chance." She looked at him, at this man who had wandered into her diner with a daughter who didn't speak and a heart that had been shattered, and felt her resolve crumble. "Okay," she said. "I'll meet her." His smile was worth every ounce of fear coursing through her veins. 2 days later, at precisely 3:00 p.m., Heather found herself standing in the lobby of a restaurant so upscale that it didn't have prices on the menu. Daniel had offered to pick her up, but she'd insisted on arriving herself, some last vestige of independence that she clung to like a security blanket. She was wearing a dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion, $89, the most she'd ever spent on a single item of clothing, and heels that were already making her feet ache. Her hair was pulled back in what she hoped was an elegant chignon, and she'd watched approximately 17 YouTube tutorials on how to apply makeup for a sophisticated daytime look. She still felt like a fraud. Heather. Daniel appeared beside her, looking effortlessly handsome, in a suit that probably cost more than her car. "You look amazing." "I look terrified." "You look amazingly terrified." He kissed her cheek, then took her hand. "Come on, she's already here." Margaret Ashford was exactly what Heather had expected, and somehow worse. 70s, immaculately dressed, with silver hair swept up in a style that screamed old money. She sat ramrod straight at a corner table, a glass of white wine untouched before her, watching their approach, with eyes that missed nothing. "Mother." Daniel leaned down to kiss her cheek. "Thank you for coming." "As if I had a choice." Margaret's voice was cool, cultured. "You've been dodging my calls for weeks, Daniel. I had to hear from the Hendersons that you've been seen with a woman who isn't Emma." The name landed like a blow. Heather felt Daniel stiffen beside her. "Mother, this is Heather Murphy. Heather, this is my mother, Margaret Ashford." "Mrs. Ashford." Heather extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you." Margaret looked at her hand like it was carrying a disease. After a long, painful moment, she gave it the briefest possible shake and gestured to the seats across from her. "Sit. Let's get this over with." The meal that followed was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of Heather's life. Margaret asked questions that felt like interrogations. Where did she grow up? Newark. What did her parents do? Construction worker, deceased, mother unknown. What was her education level? Some college unfinished. What did she do for work? Waitress. Each answer was met with a small, disapproving nod, as if Heather was confirming every terrible assumption Margaret had already made. "And how did you meet my son?" Margaret asked, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. "At the diner where I work. He came in with Lily for breakfast." "Ah, yes, the diner." The word dripped with disdain. "Daniel has developed a fondness for slumming it since Emma passed." "Mother," Daniel's voice carried a warning, "I'm simply making an observation. You used to frequent the finest establishments in the city. Now you eat breakfast at some greasy spoon in, where was it? Queens." "It's in Manhattan, actually," Heather said, surprising herself. "And the food is excellent. We make everything fresh every day. The owner has been running the place for 43 years, and people come from all over the city for our pancakes." Margaret's eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "How quaint." "It's not quaint. It's honest. Something was building in Heather's chest, a fire she usually kept banked. It's hard work and long hours and serving people who are just trying to get through their day. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't come with a corner office or a billion-dollar valuation, but it matters. Silence stretched across the table. Daniel was staring at her with something like wonder. Margaret's expression was unreadable. "And you think," Margaret said slowly, "that this qualifies you to be part of my son's life? My granddaughter's life?" "I don't think anything qualifies anyone for that." Heather's voice was steady now. "Love isn't about qualifications. It's about showing up. It's about being there day after day, even when it's hard. It's about choosing someone over and over, not because you have to, but because you want to." She took a breath. "I lost my father when I was 17. I know what it's like to grow up with a piece of yourself missing. And I would never, ever let Lily feel like she's missing anything, not if I could help it." The silence that followed felt eternal. Then, slowly, something shifted in Margaret's expression. The ice didn't thaw exactly, but it seemed to crack, just slightly. "Emma's mother walked out on her when she was 12, Margaret said quietly. "Did Daniel tell you that?" Heather shook her head. "Emma spent her entire life trying to prove she was worthy of love, that she wasn't inherently defective because her own mother had abandoned her." Margaret's eyes found Heather's. "It's why she worked so hard, achieved so much. Why she was so determined to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. She wanted to be everything her own mother wasn't." "I didn't know," Heather whispered. "She would have understood you." Margaret's voice was soft now, almost gentle. "She would have seen herself in you, the determination, the refusal to let your circumstances define you." She paused. "I was wrong about her at first. I thought she was after Daniel's money, his status. It took me years to see that she loved my son more than any of that." Daniel reached under the table and squeezed Heather's hand. "I won't make the same mistake twice," Margaret continued. "I won't pretend to approve. Not yet. You come from different worlds, and that presents challenges. But my son hasn't looked this alive in over 2 years. And my granddaughter says your name more than she says mine." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "That counts for something. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't even approval. But it was a door left open, and for now that was enough." Later, outside the restaurant, Daniel pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. "No one has ever stood up to my mother like that. I thought I was going to throw up. You hid it well." "Id." He pulled back, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I love you, Heather." The words hit her like a wave. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "You don't have to say it back," he said quickly. I needed you to know. What you said in there, about love being about showing up, about choosing someone every day, that's what I want to do. With you. For as long as you'll let me." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now, and she couldn't have stopped them if she tried. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I've loved you since you walked into my diner with a 2-year-old who didn't talk and pretended not to be heartbroken." His kiss tasted like relief and hope and the beginning of something beautiful. But even as she melted into his arms, even as she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could last, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Nothing this good can survive. You know that. You've always known that." She pushed the voice down, buried it beneath layers of happiness and hope, but it didn't disappear. It never did. 3 months passed in a blur of happiness so complete that Heather sometimes had to pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. She still worked at Rosie's diner, had refused, despite Daniel's offers, to quit. The money didn't matter, she told him. The independence did. She'd spent her entire life taking care of herself, and she wasn't about to become someone who lived off her boyfriend's generosity, no matter how many zeros were in his bank account. But everything else had changed. She spent 4 nights a week at Daniel's penthouse now, had a drawer in his bedroom, a shelf in his bathroom, a mug in his kitchen that Lily had picked out specifically for her, bright yellow with a cartoon elephant on it, because elephants were Lily's favorite thing in the world, after Heather herself, according to Daniel. She'd become, without meaning to, a central part of their lives. She helped with bedtime routines and weekend outings. She learned Lily's favorite songs, her least favorite vegetables, the specific way she liked her sandwiches cut, triangles, never squares. She found herself thinking in terms of we instead of I. We need to pick up more oatmeal. We should take Lily to the zoo. We forgot to pay the electricity bill. Well, Daniel paid the electricity bill. She still had her own apartment, her own bills, her own stubborn insistence on maintaining some semblance of financial independence. But the lines were blurring. "Move in with us," Daniel said one night, as they lay tangled together in his ridiculously expensive sheets. "Officially, permanently." Heather's heart lurched. "Daniel, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together 3 months, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore." Dasim, he propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with those storm-grey eyes that still made her breath catch. "Lily can't imagine her life without you. She asked me yesterday why you don't sleep in Daddy's room every night." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you have your own house, but that maybe someday you'd live with us." He traced a finger along her collarbone. Was I lying? She wanted to say yes, wanted to throw herself into this with both feet, abandon caution and fear and every protective instinct that had kept her alive for 26 years. But that voice, that small, insistent voice, wouldn't let her. "Can I think about it?" she asked. Something flickered across Daniel's face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment, but he masked it quickly. "Of course. Take all the time you need." They didn't talk about it again, but Heather could feel the question hanging between them, a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. She was at the diner 3 weeks later when everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning, slow enough that she'd been able to actually eat breakfast for once, a rare luxury. She was refilling the coffee maker when the bell over the door chimed, and she turned with her usual smile ready, expecting a regular. The woman who walked in was not a regular. She was beautiful, strikingly so, with dark hair and sharp features and clothes that screamed money even louder than Daniel's. But there was something in her eyes that made Heather's smile falter, something cold, calculating. "Can I help you?" Heather asked, grabbing a menu. "Heather Murphy?" The woman's voice was cool, cultured. "The waitress who's been seeing Daniel Ashford." Everything in Heather went still. "Who's asking?" "Victoria Chen." The woman extended a hand that Heather didn't take. "Emma's best friend, and I believe the woman who should have been raising her daughter." Heather's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry. Emma and I were like sisters." Victoria slid into a booth without being invited, crossing her legs like she owned the place. "We met at Yale, roomed together for 3 years. I was her maid of honor. I was supposed to be Lily's godmother." Her expression hardened. "And then Emma died, and Daniel shut me out completely." I don't understand." "Of course you don't. He didn't tell you, did he?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Daniel has a way of rewriting history to suit his narrative. He probably told you that Emma's death was a tragedy, that he's been grieving ever since, that he's finally ready to move on. Did he mention that Emma and I had a plan?" Heather felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. "What plan?" "If anything happened to Emma during childbirth, she was high risk, she knew the dangers. I was supposed to help raise Lily. We'd discussed it for months, drawn up documents. She trusted me with her daughter's life." Victoria's voice cracked slightly before she regained control. And then she died. And Daniel decided that I wasn't good enough, wasn't family. He cut me off completely, wouldn't return my calls, wouldn't let me see Lily. I've spent 2 years fighting for visitation rights. I don't. Heather shook her head. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're really involved with. Victoria leaned forward. Daniel Ashford isn't a grieving widower trying to do right by his daughter. He's a control freak who pushed away everyone Emma loved because he wanted Lily all to himself. He isolated that little girl from everyone who could have told her about her mother, her real mother, not the sanitized version Daniel presents. That's not... Heather started, but Victoria cut her off. Ask him about me. Ask him why Emma's best friend, the woman she chose to be Lily's godmother, hasn't seen that child in over 2 years. Victoria stood, pulling a business card from her designer purse. And when he lies to you, because he will, call me. I have documents, emails from Emma, proof of everything I'm saying. She placed the card on the table and walked out, leaving Heather standing alone in the empty diner, her world suddenly tilted on its axis. That night, Heather brought it up. She'd spent the entire day agonizing over whether to mention Victoria's visit, whether to simply ignore it and pretend it never happened. But she'd promised herself, when she started this relationship, that she wouldn't build it on secrets. They were in Daniel's kitchen, Lily already in bed, when she finally found the words. "Someone came to see me today," she said, "at the diner." Daniel looked up from the dishes he was washing. "Who?" "Victoria Chen." The plate in his hands slipped, crashing into the sink with a sound that made Heather flinch. Daniel's face had gone pale. "What did she tell you?" "A lot of things." Heather's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "She said she was Emma's best friend, that she was supposed to help raise Lily, that you cut her off after Emma died and have been fighting her in court ever since. She's..." Daniel gripped the edge of the counter like he needed it to stay upright. "It's complicated." "Then explain it to me." For a long moment he didn't speak. Heather watched the emotions play across his face. Anger, grief, something that looked almost like shame. "Victoria and Emma were close," he finally said. "Very close. And yes, there were conversations about what would happen if something went wrong during the birth. Emma was scared. She wanted to make sure Lily would be taken care of. So Victoria was telling the truth? Parts of it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What she didn't tell you is that after Emma died, Victoria became obsessed. She showed up at the hospital demanding to hold Lily. She called me 17 times in one day. She tried to get herself appointed as Lily's legal guardian, even though Emma and I were married, even though I was perfectly capable of raising my own daughter. Daniel. She kept saying that Emma would have wanted her involved, that I was disrespecting Emma's wishes by keeping Lily from her. But Heather..." His voice broke. "Emma trusted me to make decisions for our daughter. Me, not Victoria. And Victoria's vision of what Emma wanted wasn't. It wasn't accurate." "What do you mean?" "Emma and Victoria had a complicated relationship. It wasn't all sunshine and friendship. They fought constantly in those last few months, about the nursery, about baby names, about whether Victoria would move into our guest room after the birth." He ran a hand through his hair. "Emma actually asked me, 2 weeks before she died, to make sure Victoria didn't take over. She said Victoria had this way of inserting herself into every situation, of making everything about her. She was worried that if something happened, Victoria would use it as an excuse to move in and never leave." Heather felt the ground shifting beneath her again. "So you did exactly what Emma asked." "I tried to do it gently. I really did. But Victoria wouldn't accept it. She kept pushing, kept showing up, kept trying to insert herself into Lily's life. Eventually, I had to get a restraining order." "A restraining order?" "She broke into our apartment, walked right past the doorman, used a key Emma had given her years ago. I came home to find her in Lily's nursery, holding my daughter, refusing to give her back. Daniel's eyes were wet now. Lily was terrified. She screamed for an hour after Victoria finally left. I had nightmares about it for months. Heather sank into a kitchen chair, her mind reeling. She didn't mention any of that. Of course she didn't. Victoria is very good at telling her version of events. He sat across from her, reaching for her hands. I'm sorry. I should have told you about her before. I thought she'd moved on. The restraining order expired 6 months ago, and I hadn't heard from her since. Why is she coming after me now? Because she saw us, somewhere. There was a photo in some gossip column last week. Billionaire CEO spotted with mystery woman, and she must have recognized Lily. His grip on her hands tightened. She's not actually interested in Lily's well-being, Heather. She's interested in proving that she was right, that she should have been raising Emma's daughter. And you're a threat to that narrative. How am I a threat? Because you're doing what she wanted to do. You're in Lily's life. Lily calls you Mama. His voice was raw. Victoria can't stand that. She spent 2 years fighting for the right to be in that position, and a waitress from Queens swooped in and took it from her without even trying. Heather stared at him, trying to reconcile the man she loved with the person Victoria had described. Both versions contained truth. She could sense that. The question was which truth mattered more. She gave me her number, Heather said quietly. Told me to call when you lied to me. Daniel's expression flickered. I'm not lying to you. I know. And she did, mostly. But there was a seed of doubt now, planted deep, and she couldn't pretend it wasn't there. I need some time to process all of this. Heather, I'm not leaving, she said quickly. I'm not. This doesn't change how I feel about you, or Lily. I just need to think. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Okay, whatever you need. She went home that night, her own apartment, her own bed, her own space to think. She lay awake until 3 a.m., turning Victoria's words over in her mind, comparing them to Daniel's explanation, trying to find the truth somewhere in between. She didn't call Victoria, but she didn't throw away the business card either, and that, perhaps, was the beginning of the end. The crack in their relationship grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, over the next 2 weeks. Heather found herself watching Daniel more carefully now, analyzing his words for deception, searching his face for signs of the controlling man Victoria had described. She hated herself for it, hated the way suspicion had poisoned something that had been so pure, so simple. But she couldn't stop. Small things started to bother her. The way Daniel always wanted to know where she was. The way he checked his phone constantly when they were together, as if waiting for some disaster to strike. The way he sometimes looked at her with an intensity that bordered on desperation, like he was afraid she would disappear if he blinked. She told herself these were the behaviors of a man who had lost his wife. A man who had learned in the most brutal possible way that the people you love can be taken from you without warning. But Victoria's words echoed in her head. He's a control freak who pushed away everyone Emma loved. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Heather did something she'd sworn she wouldn't do. She Googled Victoria Chen. What she found was complicated. Victoria was a successful attorney, partner at a major firm, specializing in family law. She was on the boards of several charities, had been featured in multiple women-to-watch lists, and appeared to be exactly what she'd claimed, a wealthy, accomplished woman who had been Emma's closest friend. She also found the court records. The custody battle Victoria had mentioned was real. 2 years of legal filings, motions and countermotions. Victoria had indeed sought visitation rights. Daniel had opposed them. The case had been decided in Daniel's favor, but Heather couldn't find the details of why. She also found something else. A news article from 14 months ago. Tech billionaire seeks restraining order against late wife's best friend. The details were sparse. The actual court documents were sealed, but the article mentioned concerning behavior and unauthorized access to the family residence. Daniel's version checked out, mostly, but so did Victoria's. Heather closed her laptop, more confused than before. The breaking point came 3 days later. Daniel had been acting strange all morning, distracted, on edge, constantly checking his phone. When Heather asked what was wrong, he'd brushed it off as work stress, but something in his eyes told her it was more than that. They were at his apartment, Lily playing in the corner with her stuffed animals, when Daniel's phone rang. He looked at the screen, went pale, and excused himself to take the call in the other room. Heather tried to focus on Lily, on the elaborate tea party she was hosting for Mr. Elephant and his friends. But she could hear Daniel's voice through the wall, muffled, tense, saying things she couldn't quite make out, and then clearly, "She can't find out, not yet, I'll handle it." Heather's blood turned to ice. When Daniel emerged from the bedroom, his face was composed, but Heather could see the cracks in his armor. "Everything okay?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Fine, just work stuff." He kissed her forehead, a quick, distracted gesture that felt nothing like the tender kisses she'd grown accustomed to. "I need to go into the office for a few hours. Can you stay with Lily?" "Of course." He was out the door within minutes, barely pausing to say goodbye to his daughter. Heather watched him go, her mind racing. She can't find out. Not yet. What was he hiding? The answer came 2 hours later, in the form of Victoria Chen. The doorman called up, confused, apologetic, explaining that a woman was insisting on seeing Ms. Murphy, claiming it was urgent. Heather's first instinct was to refuse, to send Victoria away and pretend none of this was happening. But curiosity won out. "Send her up." Victoria arrived looking less polished than before, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching a manila folder like it contained state secrets. "I wasn't going to come," she said, the moment Heather opened the door. "I told myself to leave you alone, to let you figure it out on your own. But then I found out what he's planning, and I couldn't slow down." Heather held up a hand. "Lily is in the other room. Whatever this is, keep your voice down." Victoria nodded, taking a breath. "Can we talk, please?" Against her better judgment, Heather led her to the kitchen, positioning herself where she could still see Lily through the doorway. "What's going on?" Victoria placed the manila folder on the counter. "Do you know what next Tuesday is?" "No. It's the 2nd anniversary of Emma's death." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And Daniel has filed a petition to officially change Lily's birth certificate, to remove Emma's name as mother and add someone else's." The world tilted. "What?" "He's been planning this for months. Working with lawyers, child psychologists, building a case for why it would be in Lily's best interest to have a living mother listed on her official documents, rather than a deceased one." Victoria's eyes met Heather's. "He's going to ask you to adopt Lily, and once that happens, once your name is on her birth certificate, Emma will be erased." Heather's hands were shaking. "That can't be legal. It's complicated. In cases where a child never knew their biological mother, there are precedents for allowing an adoptive parent's name to replace the original. It's rare, but not impossible, especially with Daniel's resources." Victoria's voice hardened. "He tried this before, you know. 3 years into his marriage. He wanted to legally change Emma's last name to Ashford, even though she'd kept her maiden name. He told her it was about unity, about being a family. But really, he just wanted to control every aspect of her identity." "How do you know all this?" "Because Emma told me. We talked almost every day, right up until she died. She loved Daniel, truly loved him, but she also saw his flaws clearly. His need for control, his inability to share anything, including his own daughter." Victoria pushed the folder toward Heather. These are copies of Emma's journals, her private thoughts. I've kept them for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to share them with someone who might understand. Heather stared at the folder, not touching it. Why are you doing this? Because Emma was my sister in every way that mattered. Because I promised her before she died that I would protect her legacy, that I would make sure Lily knew who her real mother was, not some sanitized version, not a name that could be erased from a document, but the real, complicated, beautiful woman who gave her life, bringing that child into the world. Victoria's tears were falling freely now. I failed her. For 2 years I failed her. But I won't let Daniel erase her completely, not if I can help it. Heather didn't know what to believe anymore. She asked Victoria to leave, needed time alone to think, to process everything she'd just learned. Victoria went reluctantly, leaving the folder behind, leaving Heather standing in Daniel's kitchen with a sleeping toddler in the next room and a heart that felt like it was breaking. She opened the folder. Emma's journals were handwritten, pages and pages of thoughts and feelings spanning the last 2 years of her life. Heather felt like a voyeur, reading the private words of a dead woman, but she couldn't stop. Some entries were mundane: grocery lists, appointment reminders, random observations about life, but others were deeply personal. Emma writing about her fears during pregnancy, her complicated relationship with her mother-in-law, her love for Daniel, and her frustration with his controlling tendencies. One entry, dated 3 weeks before Lily's birth, stood out. Daniel wants to name her Lily. I wanted Rose, after my grandmother, but he won't hear of it. He says Lily is more elegant, more appropriate for an Ashford. Sometimes I wonder if he sees me as a person, or just a vessel for his legacy. I love him. God help me. I love him more than I've ever loved anyone. But I'm scared of what happens after this baby comes. What if I'm not enough? What if I can never be the perfect wife, the perfect mother he seems to expect? What if this baby is just another thing he tries to control? Victoria says I'm being paranoid. She says Daniel loves me, that he just expresses it differently than other people. Maybe she's right. Or maybe I'm about to bring a child into a situation I don't fully understand. Either way, it's too late to turn back now. Heather closed the journal, her eyes burning. This was a woman in love and in doubt. A woman who saw her husband clearly, both his virtues and his flaws. A woman who wasn't sure if she was making the right choice, but was going ahead anyway. It wasn't the portrait of a perfect marriage, but it wasn't the portrait of a monster either. Daniel came home at 6:47 p.m. Heather heard his key in the lock, heard his footsteps in the hallway, and felt her heart begin to race. "Heather?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes immediately going to the folder on the counter. His face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Victoria came by." "Victoria was here?" His voice rose. "In my apartment with Lily." "Lily was in the other room. She didn't see anything." "That's not the point." He was shaking now, with anger, with fear, with something Heather couldn't quite identify. "I told you what Victoria did. I told you she's dangerous, and you let her into our home." "I needed answers, Daniel. Answers you weren't giving me." "I would have told you." "When?" Heather's voice cracked. "When were you going to tell me about the petition, about wanting to change Lily's birth certificate, about wanting to erase Emma's name and put mine there instead?" The silence that followed was deafening. "It's not," Daniel started, then stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "It's not about erasing Emma." "Then what is it about?" "It's about Lily. It's about giving her a mother, a real living mother who's actually here." His voice broke. "Every time she has to explain that her mom is dead, it breaks something inside her. I see it happening. The other kids at the playground, at the library, they ask about her mommy, and she has to say she's in heaven. She's 2.5 years old, and she already understands death in a way no child should. So your solution is to pretend Emma never existed?" "No!" He moved toward her, stopping when she stepped back. "My solution is to give Lily something real. Someone she can point to and say, "That's my mom." Someone who will be there for her first day of school, her graduation, her wedding. Emma can't do that. Emma is gone. His voice dropped to a whisper. "But you're here. And Lily loves you. And I hoped. You hoped I'd just go along with it? That I'd sign some papers and become her mother without even being consulted? I was going to ask you. That's what the phone call was about today. My lawyers, confirming everything was in order. I wanted to propose. This weekend, I had a ring, a whole plan." He laughed bitterly. "I wanted to ask you to marry me, to adopt Lily, to be a family. I thought it would be romantic. I didn't realize it would feel like betrayal." Heather's head was spinning. Marriage, adoption, a family, everything she'd ever wanted, being offered to her on a silver platter. And yet, "You should have told me," she said, "from the beginning, about Victoria, about the petition, about all of it. Instead, you let me stumble into it blind." "I was scared." His voice was raw. "I've lost so many people, Heather. My father. Emma. I can't lose you too. And I was terrified that if you knew everything, if you saw how broken I really am, you'd leave." "I'm not leaving because you're broken, Daniel. I'm leaving because you don't trust me." Mute, the words came out before she could stop them, and once they were out, she realized they were true. "You've been making decisions about our future without even asking me, about where this relationship is going, about what role I'm supposed to play in Lily's life. You've been so focused on controlling everything that you forgot to let me be a partner in it. Heather, please. I need some time." She moved past him, grabbing her purse from the counter. "I need to think about whether this is something I can do. Whether I can be with someone who keeps secrets, who makes decisions without me, who—" Her voice broke. "Who I'm not even sure I really know." She walked out of the apartment without looking back. Lily's voice followed her to the elevator. "Mama! Mama! We're going!" The sound of that word, the word that had started everything, made Heather's tears finally fall. 1 week passed. Then 2. Heather went back to her life, or tried to. She worked her shifts at Rosie's diner, smiled at customers, refilled coffee cups until her arm ached, but everything felt hollow now. Wrong. Like wearing clothes that no longer fit. Table 7 sat empty. Daniel and Lily never came. She told herself it was for the best. She'd spent her whole life learning that love was temporary, that happiness was borrowed. Better to end it now, before she got in any deeper, before losing them hurt even more than it already did. But the logic didn't help. Not when she woke up at 4:47 a.m. out of habit, reaching for a phone that had no new messages. Not when she heard a little girl's voice in the diner and whipped around, heart pounding, only to find a stranger. Not when she lay in her empty apartment at night, missing Daniel's warmth beside her, missing Lily's laugh, missing a life that had never fully been hers. Dolores noticed. Of course she did. 41 years of waitressing had given her an almost supernatural ability to read people. "You're going to wear a hole in that counter," she said one morning, finding Heather scrubbing the same spot for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Just being thorough. Dolores leaned against the coffee station, studying her with those wise, tired eyes. "You know what I've learned in 63 years of living, honey? That people tip better on Fridays? That too. But also, pride is a lonely bedfellow." Dolores reached out, stilling Heather's frantic scrubbing hand. "Whatever happened with your rich man and his baby girl, whatever made you run, ask yourself if it's worth losing them over. Because from where I'm standing, you've been miserable since you walked away. It's complicated. Love usually is," Dolores shrugged. "Doesn't mean you give up on it." Heather thought about those words all day, all night, into the next morning, when she found herself standing outside Daniel's building at 7:23 a.m., shivering in the early autumn cold, trying to work up the courage to go inside. She didn't have to. The door opened, and there he was. Daniel, looking like he hadn't slept in days, wearing the same grey sweater from that first morning at the diner, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. Heather. Her name left his lips like a prayer. I was just coming to find you. She didn't know what to say. Had rehearsed a dozen speeches in her head, but now, standing in front of him, every word evaporated. Please. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if afraid she might bolt. Please, just let me say something, and then if you want to leave, if you want to never see me again, I'll understand. But I need you to know, Daniel, I withdrew the petition. The words tumbled out. The birth certificate thing. I called my lawyers the day you left and told them to cancel everything. Emma's name stays. Forever. I was wrong to even consider it. Heather stared at him. You withdrew it? I was so focused on giving Lily a mother that I forgot she already has one. Emma. She'll always have Emma. He took another step closer. But I also realized something else. Something Victoria said. About control. About me wanting to make everything perfect on my own terms. She wasn't entirely wrong. I've spent 2 years trying to protect Lily from everything, including people who might have helped me, including you. Daniel. I should have told you about Victoria from the beginning, about the petition, about all of it. I kept making excuses. I was protecting you. It was too complicated. The timing wasn't right. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared that if you saw the real me, the grieving, controlling, terrified mess that I am, you wouldn't want me anymore. Tears were sliding down Heather's cheeks. I never wanted perfect. I just wanted honest. I know that now. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers intertwined with hers. I've spent the last 2 weeks doing a lot of thinking. About Emma, about Victoria, about myself. And I realized that I've been so afraid of losing people that I've been pushing them away before they can leave. Victoria, my mother, you. What changed? Lily. A sad smile crossed his face. She asks about you every single day. Where Mama go? When Mama come back? And I realized that I was doing to her exactly what I was afraid Victoria would do, making decisions about her life without considering what she actually needs. He took a shaky breath. She needs you, Heather. I need you, not as a replacement for Emma, not as a name on a birth certificate, but as you. Just you. I need you too, Heather whispered. These past 2 weeks have been awful, I know. Same. She laughed, a wet, broken sound. I kept looking at table 7 every morning, hoping you'd walk through the door. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I thought you needed space. I thought if I showed up, you'd think I was being controlling again, not respecting your boundaries. Daniel. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Sometimes respecting boundaries means showing up anyway. Sometimes it means fighting for what you want. Is that what you want? For me to fight for you? I want you to be honest with me, to trust me, to let me in, really in, not just the parts you think I can handle. She looked up at him, her heart laid bare. I'm not Emma. I'm not going to leave you, not unless you push me away, but I can't be with someone who keeps me at arm's length. I've spent my whole life being left behind, Daniel. I can't do it again. You won't have to. His voice was fierce. I swear to you, Heather, no more secrets, no more decisions without you. If you give me another chance, I'll spend every day proving that you can trust me. She should take time, think it through, protect herself. But she was so tired of protecting herself from happiness. One condition, she said, anything. We do things differently this time. We talk about everything, even the hard stuff, about Emma, about Victoria, about what we both need from this relationship. And if we're going to be a family, then I want to be a real partner. Not just someone you check in with after you've already made the decision. Deal. He squeezed her hands. I might need reminding sometimes. Old habits die hard. I'll remind you, loudly if necessary. His laugh was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. I missed you so much. I missed you too. She rose on her toes, pressing her forehead to his. Now take me upstairs. I believe there's a little girl who's been asking where her mama went. The reunion with Lily was everything Heather could have hoped for. The moment she walked through the apartment door, Lily came running, a blur of dark curls and tiny limbs, shrieking, "Mama, Mama, Mama," at the top of her lungs. Heather caught her, swept her up, held her tight as tears streamed down both their faces. "Mama came back," Lily said, her small hands patting Heather's cheeks. "Mama came back." "I came back, sweet girl. I'm sorry I was gone so long." "Never go again?" Heather looked at Daniel over Lily's head. He was crying too, silently, without shame. "Never," she promised. "Not if I can help it." 3 months later, Heather woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of rain against the windows. She reached across the bed, her fingers finding the warmth where Daniel had been sleeping moments before. Through the bedroom door, she could hear voices. Daniel's low murmur, Lily's high-pitched chatter, the clink of dishes being set on the counter. This was her life now. She still marveled at it sometimes, this impossible turn of events that had led her from a tiny studio in Queens to a penthouse overlooking Central Park, from waitress to whatever she was now. Partner, stepmother, in practice, if not yet legally. Family. She'd kept her job at Rosie's Diner 3 days a week now instead of 6. Daniel had argued at first, wanting to support her completely, but she'd held firm. The diner was part of who she was. It was where she'd met him, where Lily had spoken her first word, where everything had begun. She wasn't ready to let it go. And Daniel, to his credit, had understood, had learned to ask instead of decide, to listen instead of fix. It wasn't perfect. They still argued sometimes, still clashed over his instinct to control and her instinct to run. But they were learning, growing, together. "Mama!" Lily appeared in the bedroom doorway, her curly hair wild from sleep, wearing the elephant pajamas Heather had bought her. "Dada made pancakes. Did he burn them again?" "Only a little bit." Heather laughed, swinging her legs out of bed. "Well, I guess we'd better go supervise." In the kitchen, Daniel stood at the stove, spatula in hand, wearing an apron that said, "World's okayest chef," a gift from Heather that he wore with ironic pride. A stack of pancakes sat on a plate nearby, only slightly charred around the edges. "I'm getting better," he said defensively, catching her amused expression. "You are," she agreed, kissing his cheek. "They're almost edible now." High praise from a professional. She settled at the counter, Lily climbing into her lap with the easy familiarity of a child who had never known life without her. On the refrigerator, amid Lily's artwork and grocery lists, hung a framed photo she'd put up last month. Emma holding newborn Lily, that same photo from the nursery. Daniel had resisted at first. Old instincts. But Heather had insisted. "She's part of this family too," she'd said. "Lily should see her mother every day." He'd cried when he agreed. Heather had held him through it. Some mornings she still couldn't believe this was her life. But then Daniel would kiss her forehead, or Lily would say something that made her laugh, or she'd catch sight of that photo and remember, this wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a perfect ending, with no complications, no grief, no lingering shadows of the past. This was better. This was real. "Mama," Lily said, tugging at her sleeve, "tell story about Mama Emma." Daniel's eyes met Heather's across the counter. They'd started this ritual a few weeks ago, stories about Emma told together, so Lily could know both her mothers. "Once upon a time," Heather began, "there was a beautiful woman named Emma who loved art and books and flowers, and she wanted more than anything to have a little girl." Lily listened, rapt, as she always did. Daniel watched them both, his heart visible in his eyes. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, they were warm and safe, and together. And Heather Murphy, who had spent 26 years learning that good things never lasted, that love was borrowed, that happiness always came with an expiration date, finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about all of it. Some love stories don't end, they just keep growing, one ordinary morning at a time.